Welcome back to another episode of the Eras of Christ. I'm Pastor Paige.
And I'm Pastor Megan, and we are so glad you are here with us again on this journey down Taylor's discography,
I guess.
through the Bible, through all of the things. And this week, we are at what in season 1, I think was our longest episode.
Yes, it was.
And we're just going to put a disclaimer on it now. This one also might be our longest episode for season 2. And that's because it's Red. Taylor's version.
4 records, 8 sides, right?
Yes,
There
yes.
is so much here, and
So much.
it's a great album.
It is. But there is just so much to go into.
Yeah.
With Taylor, but also with all of the stories that, like we said, overlap and go backwards and then spring us forward
Yeah.
into some
New stuff.
new eras. Well,
Yeah.
some new time periods in the Bible.
Right.
So red, obviously, the color is red.
That
Go
was
figure.
the easiest one, right?
That's the easiest one. And our years are 2012 to 2014.
Mm-hmm.
We're more experimental. There's definitely more pop on this album.
Thank heavens.
Yes. We're getting more secure in who she is. She's getting more comfortable in calling people out, in
Yeah.
and
in
saying
who she
her
is,
words.
right? I mean, she's in her early 20s, 22,
Mm-hmm.
23 at this. And if, think back to those times or think forward
Yeah.
to them, friends who aren't there yet.
Yeah.
That is a time when you start to become more secure and understand who you are and are
Mm-hmm. Yes.
more willing to say, like, wait, this wasn't okay. Or, like, this was hard and I don't regret it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big part of this content for her.
Yes. And I think something I remember from when we talked about it the first time, this is the album she released as Taylor's version. While yes, the other ones when she does them are what she would have wanted to release at the time. But this version of Red is what she wanted
Okay.
to release. And the record company was like, you sure about that? You sure you want to have 30 plus tracks on this album?
Including one that's
10 minutes long. So we get a really complete version of how all of these songs fit together, how they go together, how they work together. We also get the songs that she gave to other recording artists.
Sold,
Sold,
probably.
yes,
Let's be real.
yes,
I mean,
yeah.
she's an excellent writer, deserves to be paid for her work.
Yes.
So non-judgmentally, she
no,
sold it.
So she either sold it or however it worked, how it works in the record industry. But she did her versions of Better Man and Babe.
She
But
does
yes.
those with some guest artists, including Gary Lightbody, her good, lovely friend Ed Sheeran.
Yes.
Phoebe Bridgers and
Yeah.
Chris Stapleton also
Yeah.
join, which
Yeah.
is cool.
Yes. And so this is where we get, the first collaboration with Ed Sheeran and then the first song that they actually did together, as one of the vault tracks.
Okay.
So, we get a lot of those songs.
Right.
And I think as we were sitting and talking through this episode earlier, made it a lot harder, but also a lot easier to find things. I don't think we're nearly as snarky as we were in the last 2 albums.
It might have helped that, friends, you don't necessarily know this, we both had a little bit of time away between our last recording and today as we're doing this. So you got to go to Exploration in Florida.
Yes, and I got to meet some people that have been listening to
That's so exciting.
the podcast and was amazing. So hi, Jenny. Well, thanks for listening. And all of our new listeners from getting our little stickers from down there. Yeah. Exploration was a wonderful time. But then you also were on vacation
I was.
for a week.
But why don't we tell our listeners who may not be
Yes.
United Methodist what
Yes.
Exploration is?
Yes. So Exploration is this conference that the United Methodist Church typically puts on every 2 to 4 years, depending on the cycle and if there's a global pandemic happening.
Right.
The last one that happened was in November of 2019, and this one happened this past February. And it's a conference that's held somewhere. This time it was held in Orlando. And it's for 18 to 26-year-olds that are discovering their call to ministry. And it's 2.5 days of fellowship, of worship, of getting to talk to other students, seminarians, people that are helping you along your way. I was there with my seminary to help recruit, but also was really filled with how excited this group of young people are for everything that's coming along in the denomination. So it was, really good time just to be down there and to do all of those things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I just went on vacation, just took some time away with the fam and rested and played games and stuff. So it was awesome.
Yeah, which was, I think, both really good for us because, as you know, even as we're releasing this, we are in the midst of our second busy season of the year. We're in the midst of Lent. So, yeah. So why don't we get into this with our personal verses for God during Red? So why don't you start, Paige?
Well, so when I was listening to the album, it is so much, right? And I try to not completely Taylor Swift my poor boyfriend to death. So I didn't listen to it as much as the first time. I mean, the first time we did this one, I drove to Wisconsin, to Chicago, then Wisconsin, and back to Ohio. Yeah. And so I had a lot of time to listen to it. So it was really fun to come back to tracks that I hadn't listened to in a while.
Yeah.
And the one that really struck me this time around was Forever Winter. Which I think I talked about last time and I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But the verses, there were 2 lines in the song that really made me think of how I understand God, right? Who God is to me. And they're both towards the end of the song. And so the one is, I'd say I'd love you even at your darkest. And please don't go. And then at the very end, he says he doesn't believe anything much he hears these days. I say, believe in one thing. I won't go away. And this idea that God is with us through all of it, through our summers, our winters, our springs, our falls is one of the most important things to me about my faith. It was actually pretty easy once I heard the song again to go, that's it. There we are.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So me, I can sort of see that we did like things again in our own ways. But I went with Red this time.
Okay.
And which is a surprise because it's, when you first hear it, you probably wouldn't think, okay. But it's the chorus.
Okay.
And it's all the way she describing all the different things that they felt like and they looked like. So losing him was blue, like I'd never known. Missing him was dark gray, all alone. Forgetting him was like trying to know somebody you never met. But loving him was love. Loving him was red. Loving him was red. And for me, that is just sort of how your Forever Winter is. In all the ways God's with us.
Yeah.
In when losing something, life is blue, but God is still there. Missing him was dark gray, but God was still there. Forgetting him because Lord knows there were times in my life where I forgot that God was a part of my life.
Right.
But God was still there as somebody I never met. And this will make more sense when I, because surprise, surprise, I had 2 songs.
Oh, I'm shocked.
I know. We're shocked.
Look, there were 30. So the fact that you got to 2.
Yes.
So what was your second one?
So my other one is, and I think it's the same one from when we did it with Jesus.
Okay.
It's State of Grace. I never saw you coming and I'll never be the same. And as you all, if you've listened to the first season, you know how I struggled with my relationship with God after my dad died and all that sort of stuff. But this to me is like, oh, I never saw my call coming. And I will never be the same.
Right.
And it's, somebody you've never met. I never met that version of myself until I got my call.
Right.
But loving him was red. Ironically enough, one of the Methodist colors is red.
Right.
So, but like, it's, I never saw you coming, but loving him was red because everything finally made sense.
Right.
Yes, there are days where it doesn't make sense and it's just so much, but I'm never going to be the same. So those are my 2 for the personal part of our verses.
Yeah. Well, I loved I do love this album, and it was because it's so long, it was really challenging to see where everything fit. So I know several of these songs actually had multiple things with them.
Yeah.
In the past couple of episodes, we've found one song that we kept coming back to. Well, friends, because there are 30.
Yes.
That didn't happen this time.
No.
It really didn't.
Yeah.
And last week we sort of introduced you to a format that we're going to use a little bit, where we're going to tell you the songs on this track that go with parts of the Bible we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And then talk about where we are in the story and move ahead with that. I don't think this time we didn't have anything that jumps outside of our timeline.
I don't think so.
We did last week, but we do have a couple that are from earlier.
Yes.
Right. And so this one is a little snarky.
Yes.
And it's going back to that story about Adam and Eve and the song Trouble.
I knew you were trouble.
I knew you were trouble when you walked in. I don't know if that's Eve to the serpent or Adam to Eve or God to all three of them. Yeah. I don't know, but hey, trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the goat version in particular.
Yes. Yes.
Have you seen the Travis version?
Have you seen the Jason Kelce version?
Oh, there's a Jason. Oh, I'll have to look for that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jason Kelce.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is a good transition. In the song, this was the second one that we had that kind of goes earlier, is from Nothing New, right? And Nothing New is, the beginning of it is very much like you're told to go and live your life and sow your oats and da-da, but when you do it, people get mad.
Yeah.
And there's a line in there about she had too much to drink.
Yeah.
And it immediately made me think of a story with our dude Noah.
Yeah, that we don't really hear a lot.
We don't hear this story because it's a little embarrassing, right?
Just a little bit.
So Noah and his kids get off the ark. This is, I'll tell you this is the Page revised version.
Yes.
Noah and his kids get off the ark. They begin to live life, right?
Yeah.
So Noah, as people did in those times, planted a farm and planted, most importantly, a vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Because they didn't have Jesus yet to turn water into wine.
Exactly, right? So it must have been several years later because it takes grapes a long time to come onto the vines, and then time for it to ferment.
Yes, and do all the things that wine does.
Brilliantly. And so he has some of his fruit of the vine, his fermented wine, and he, gets drunk.
Yeah.
And he goes into his tent and takes off all his clothes.
As one does,
right? Like it's bedtime, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Drink responsibly.
Right. The implication is it's in the middle of the day. Right. And so the youngest son, Ham, comes to look for his father and just barges into the tent without knocking and finds his dad naked. Everything hanging out.
Everything.
Yeah. Feet are not always feet, depending on the translation of the Bible you read this story in. It's from Genesis 9, by the way. And Ham goes to tell his brothers, like, oh, good.
Of course. Look what Dad did now.
Look what Dad did. This righteous man, look at what Dad did, you know? And the other brothers, like, back into the tent and cover their father up with a robe without looking, right?
Yeah.
So I kept thinking about this idea of someone in the Bible who has too much to drink. Because that's part of Nothing New. So
exactly. Yes. So, two fun ones to start with. Yeah.
And now we get to the moment that Megan has been waiting for like 15 episodes.
Yes, because as soon as Paige brought this idea to me, and it feels like it should be a year and a half ago, but really it was just August.
Right.
And we were talking through the episodes, and I was like, but we can't talk about this yet. Because last season was all about Jesus.
Right.
And so, yes, we did talk about this song, but in a very Jesus way.
Right.
But to me, this song, I claimed it last season. I claimed it again this season. And I know there'll be songs that you will claim for yourself.
It's fine because I love how excited it makes you. And I'm so glad that people get to hear about this.
It's holy ground. Okay. So this is Moses, Exodus 3:2-6. This is when he sees the burning bush, and particularly line 5. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground.
Boom. There it is.
There it is. And Taylor talks about how we are standing on holy ground. We are dancing on holy ground. Just the place where we are is holy and special and
a place where she felt safe, right?
Yes.
Like listening to the lyrics to that song, kept thinking, knowing that you were talking about the burning bush with this, this idea of I didn't have to look down.
Yeah. Yeah. And because Moses was definitely like, you know, this starts with the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. And the Lord saw and calls him, Moses, Moses. And Moses says, here I am. Mm-hmm. And then we get the famous line, do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. And I love that line so much because it makes me think of all of the places we have been privileged to walk that are truly holy places. Mm-hmm. The places where we get to stand every Sunday to preach. That's why once it is nice enough, I usually will tend to preach without shoes on.
Okay.
And usually the Sundays when I'm feeling nervous or apprehensive about what I'm preaching about or just feeling anxious, I usually try and take my shoes off so I can feel grounded.
Okay.
It's harder to do when I'm outside at one of my churches because we have gravel that I stand on and I can't do that.
Yeah.
And one of my ladies at one of my churches, she'll know when I take my shoes off. She's like, you needed to be grounded today, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of my dear, dear mentors who's no longer with us preached every Sunday without shoes on.
No kidding. I was guessing it was Valerie. Wow.
Yeah, dear Valerie never preached with shoes on. She always took them off. And, you know, I believe even when we were in Africa together, she also preached without shoes on. And to me, that's just, and it makes me think of all the times we were in Cambodia. Mm-hmm. Before we walked into any of the churches, our shoes came off.
Right.
Now, part of it, I think, was for sanitary reasons or whatever because of all the ground we were walking on. But also there was that underlying, you're stepping into a sacred place.
Well, and I mean, people in lots of other parts of the world never wear shoes at home, right?
Yes.
Because you don't want to bring the outside inside. Mm-hmm. I haven't historically been that person, but I was introduced to the joys of slippers, and so I'm a little bit more that way.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is definitely, I will be able to geek out about this verse and this song here with you all when I teach this in Bible study next Tuesday. No one else will be as geeked out about this as I will be.
You should just play Holy Ground when people are walking in.
I should.
That'd be
and
funny.
They'll be like, what's going on? I'll be like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. It's for me. I'm being grounded.
I'm being grounded. We're good.
Well, you know, it's funny. There's a track that is later on in the album that is the stuff that happens right before this. I just had to go back and check.
Okay.
So there's a point in Moses's life where he ends up in a dispute and in a fight. Okay. And the other person is killed. An Egyptian was killed. And so part of the reason that Moses is where he would be to see the Lord in the burning bush is because he runs like he runs from the law and ends up in that place. Yeah. So that was another track that jumped out at me. Run like you run from the law. Mm-hmm. So that's in Exodus, 2:11 ish is where that story happens, and then we go to Exodus 3 and he finds the burning bush.
Yeah. So while he's also doing something very ordinary, taking his father-in-law's sheep out to roam.
Yeah, it's amazing where God appears.
And when you think of the things that Taylor's talking about in Holy Ground, they're all everyday, ordinary things.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so.
Because God, I mean, the stories that we're talking about, and particularly this story about Moses and the Israelites leaving Egypt, is extraordinary, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And there's an experience that we have as humans of leaving and needing to step away from things that aren't good for us anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? Like, I think that's a really important piece of that is that we think, oh, we have to leave the thing because it's bad without remembering that there was a reason it was good.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I love about how she writes and the mix of the music here too. Like there's some that are real, like, we are never, ever getting back together.
Yeah.
Or
stay. And
aren't they one after another on the album?
They're back to back. Yeah.
We almost broke up again last night is the beginning of Stay.
Yeah. Well, we get I Almost Do. We are never, ever getting back together. Stay. The last time.
Right. All before Holy Ground.
All before Holy Ground and Sad, Beautiful, Tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah. This to me is very much, we get Storyteller album with Folklore and Evermore. But this to me is like very much a Storyteller album as well, with the way the songs connect to each other.
Well, and they're her stories here, right? The others aren't as much her own, her personal stories.
Correct.
Right?
Like, fabrications. Right. But we'll get to that when we get to Folklore and Evermore.
So we don't want to jump to my favorite albums. We'll hang out with Red, which is a great album. Again.
Yes.
So I mentioned We're Never Ever Getting Back Together.
Yes.
And this is one where we both had it with something, and you had it with the Moses story, right?
Yes. Are we surprised? Because I feel like Moses is my dude.
Yeah.
For at least this album. I will promise to get off him for our next stuff, but there was just too much. So Never Ever Getting Back Together is Moses and the Israelites to Pharaoh.
Yep.
During the plagues. We are never ever getting back together. Oh, you want some frogs?
Like
got them.
Ever, right?
You want some locusts? Okay. How about your firstborn? Okay. Just all of the things.
Yeah.
So yes, that's Never Ever Getting Back Together. Moses and the Israelites to Pharaoh as they are getting out of Dodge.
Right. I love it. Well, we shared a little bit about what happens next, right? They leave Egypt and they're going to the Promised Land and they're stuck there forever. And in that time, some really important things happen.
Yes.
We shared a little bit last week about how the people, however, longed to go back.
Yeah.
They kept being like, but it's better.
Uh-huh.
But at least we had food, but da-da-da.
Yeah. Even though we were enslaved, it was better.
Right. And so God ends up providing for the people, right? So Moses gets water in the middle of a desert from a rock.
Yes.
And
he strikes it with his rod.
And then God rains down manna from the sky. And I was trying to figure out if there was a good manna reference at all.
Oh, there is.
I mean, it's marginal, but it's
still good.
I also love the song "Stay, Stay, Stay."
Yes.
It was like Forever Winter when I listened to it again. I was like, oh, this song is. I mean, she says it at the end. That's so fun.
Yes.
Right?
And I think I got a text message that said, "I forgot how much I love Stay, Stay, Stay."
You did. I did said that. But there's a great line about how I've always dated self-indulgent takers. But now he carries my groceries and I'm always laughing.
Yes.
And I love that image of the way that this relationship is providing something for her. And it's food, groceries, and like the manna coming from heaven.
Yes. So we're providing the groceries that the Israelites needed.
I mean, quite literally.
That's true Instacart right there.
Oh my goodness. But you can't hoard it.
No,
can't hoard it.
You have to share.
You have to share, and you can't have like
more than what you needed for your day. Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the stockpiling question is part of the reason they ended up in Egypt was because Egypt had stockpiled.
Ooh, yeah.
And the whole thing about those 40 years in the desert is you can't be the same peoples that you were.
Yeah.
And so we have to break some of those bad habits.
Yeah.
You don't need to stockpile this. You need to trust that more will be there.
Don't need to make the golden calf.
Right.
Worship one God. Be patient. Moses has to go contemplate.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the other song that made me think of that, like, desire to go back.
Yeah.
Is Better Man.
Yeah.
Right. Like, for them, for many of the average person, in some ways, at least there was security.
Yes.
At least there was food, right? So there is that sense of looking back at that person going, but I wish you were better because you did do good things,
Yeah, there was good in knowing that I had a home and a job and food, except you took a portion of my money and you treated me terribly. And
I had no choice in what I did with my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Pharaoh.
Right?
I wish you were a better man.
Right. Yeah. Right? You see it?
That works. It works. It works.
Yeah. Now, one of the other important things that happens in the desert, and
there's a lot of things that happen in the desert.
Right. So one, we're trying to teach people how to live in new ways.
Yes.
Right. So we've got several books in this part of scripture that feel like all they are lists of rules.
Yes.
And that's not actually all there are. There are stories smattered in between
the list of rules.
And so I was thinking, how are we going to talk about that here? Because that's an important part of the story.
Right? It is, yeah.
And these rules exist because now you're your own people, and I'm going to teach you how to be a people.
Yes. Yeah.
And so some of the rules, a lot of the rules about how we relate to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of them are about things like adultery, and affairs, and leaving your girl at home trying to pick someone else up. Yep.
All bad things.
All bad things.
And Taylor has a song about it called Girl at Home.
I love that song too.
It's a good song.
Right.
It's a good song.
But I was listening to it and I went, well, yeah, I mean, these are the rules for marriage and family change when you're no longer under an oppressor.
Yeah.
Because the oppressor was probably telling people who they should marry.
Yeah.
And there may have been cultural things about multiple wives or multiple husbands or whatever that wasn't what they wanted to carry through.
Yeah.
And so in the end, however, the first generation, people who actually escaped Egypt, were not allowed to enter the promised land.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't undo all of the ways they had learned to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the next generation that got to enter the promised land.
Yeah.
And so there was a moment, and I read this to you earlier, where Moses is like, but please, God, please.
Yeah.
Can I see it? Can I go?
Yeah.
And he says, please, God, you've only begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. Mm-hmm. What God on earth or heaven can act as you do. Please let me cross over the Jordan River so I can see the wonderful land that lies beyond it.
Yeah.
But the Lord was angry with me. He wouldn't listen to me. He said to me, that's enough from you. Don't ever ask me about this again.
Yeah.
And you can go and look at it over. Go look at it. But Joshua is going to lead the people into the promised land.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, great. You did your whole job. You got them out of Egypt. You got them through these 40 years, but you're going to stop here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me,
just,
that's the moment God knew. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I was thinking about the moment I knew. Obviously, that was where I was going with that.
Yes.
And that idea of her having the birthday party, him not being there, and him calling her and going, oops, sorry I wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just your birthday.
Right. And I'm sorry too, she says. And that was the moment I knew.
Yeah.
So there were things that were reasons they didn't go, and it was that they couldn't learn to live a new way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, there's all of those from that time period of the 40 years in the desert, the getting so close to the promised land. And then we start a new thing.
Yeah. Everything changes.
Yeah.
Huh. Hey, look, there's a song on that.
There's another one.
Everything has changed, right? And
featuring Ed Sheeran.
Right. And the entrance of the Israelites into the promised land features Joshua.
Yeah.
We meet a new one, new person who leads everybody in, crosses the Jordan River. There's some stuff that happens there that we'll probably talk about in a later season about all of that. But they go and try to check out this new place and figure out the safe way in. And I kept thinking about come back, be here.
Yeah.
With that. But also everything has changed, right?
Yeah.
Is a perfect one. And there's a line about taking down walls in Everything Has Changed. And one of the things that happens early is this idea of they try to breach the walls of Jericho.
And the walls came tumbling down.
They marched around them 7 times.
Yes.
And the
in
walls.
In a certain direction.
Right. With the horn. I never know all the details of that kind
of
story.
I have to sing the song in my head.
I don't think Taylor's recorded that particular song. I think it's like 7.
Yeah.
But when I was listening and there was this line about walls coming down.
Yeah.
That I was like, okay.
It works.
We're there. Everything has changed as we cross into the promised land.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they have to live with those rules.
They do.
They do.
And accept that those are the rules that are going to govern them now.
Mm-hmm.
And they need people to help govern them.
Yeah.
And be in rule.
They do. And there's some really interesting things that happen around who's going to be in charge of us over the next several books of the Bible.
Yeah.
So here, first God appoints Moses and his brother Aaron as his spokesperson. Then God appoints Joshua to lead the people into the promised land. Mm-hmm. And Joshua leads them and they defeat and steal land from people and all of the stuff that happens in Joshua. It's not my favorite book.
We will get to it in other albums,
maybe,
I'm assuming, or in other seasons.
Yeah,
who knows?
So but it's just hard to think about them destroying people and taking their land from them and all of that. It's uncomfortable, I'll be honest.
It's hard stuff.
It is. But one of the things that happens is when Joshua dies, the people cry out to God for a new person to rule them. Mm-hmm. And what we get in the Bible is a whole book of sort of short stories.
Yeah, we do.
About those people who rules. That's the book of Judges.
Yeah.
And there's a cycle in Judges where the people cry out and say, God, give us a ruler. A judge is appointed. And not like a judge with a gavel.
Yeah, that's what I always thought.
It's more like a judge, an arbiter of justice.
Yeah.
Right. So their job is to keep the people safe, sometimes from themselves, often from other people, or to liberate them.
Yeah.
So the judge comes in, they do their thing, they liberate them from whatever. Yeah. And then there is peace in Israel for X number of years, or among the Israelites for X number of years.
And then
the people begin to sin in God's eyes, and God turns them over to a foreign ruler.
A new judge.
And a new judge is risen up to just, defeat the foreign ruler. Mm-hmm. And there are several. There's a guy named Ehud. Ehud is hilarious. Yeah. He defeats the king because he's left-handed. It's a great story. It's Judges chapter 3. We have Deborah, and we'll talk about Deborah later.
Yep.
And then we've got a few more, but then we have probably the most well-known judge is Samson.
Yeah.
And but before we get to Samson,
yes, what are our Judge Cycle songs?
Yeah, so that's called.
You had 2 of them.
I did. So that's called the Judges Cycle, by the way.
Yeah. Makes sense because there's a cycle of judges.
Right. Yep. And this repeated behavior.
Yes.
And so there were 2 songs for me that really struck that idea of the the struggle and then the new hope, the struggle and the new hope. And so that was Last Time.
Yeah.
And Begin Again.
Oh, yeah.
Like
they had to go together. The two songs have to go together for the Judges cycle.
And Babe probably fits there too. This is the last time I'll ever call you babe.
Maybe also Better Man.
Yeah.
You know?
God saying, I want you guys to be better, so I'm going to turn you over to...
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the vault tracks might have been able to fit there too. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. But then we get our second interpretation of never ever getting back together.
So there's this guy named Samson.
Yes, you probably know about him.
Samson had some wives.
Yep.
But not like Solomon, who had lots of wives. Samson has a few wives that are actually talked about in the Judges, Book of Judges. But one of them is a woman from a foreign people group, and her name is Delilah. Mm-hmm. And the rulers of this foreign group are like, "Ooh, get close to him," and you figure out why he's so good, why he's so strong. And so she does these things to try to bring him down so that the other group, the Philistines is what they're called, can defeat the people of Israel and take their land back. It's a whole thing. And she finally shaves his head because his power came from his hair.
Yes.
But his hair, I just was reading this today, his hair immediately starts to grow back. So his power starts to return right away.
Yeah, but still in that moment, he loses his power.
Right. And because they had to explain why he was defeated, I think. Right?
Yeah.
So Samson, he keeps letting her do these things to him. And like, but in the end, he finally basically says,
we are never, ever getting back together.
Like ever. Like nar. Yep. Yeah. So that's Judges. And it's a neat book.
Yeah.
Because it is all these short stories. And just explaining the different people who ruled and the way that people kept crying out to God, like, God, we know you're our ruler. But we need some help, right?
Yes.
We need someone to help be in charge, to lead us, to help us live according to these laws that you set out in a whole bunch of books. And I don't want to leave this one out.
Yeah.
So there are 5 books at the beginning of the Bible.
Yes.
Right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers.
Yes.
You had a song for the Book of Numbers, which I just think is hilarious.
Because it doesn't really fit. And so my note says 22, the Book of Numbers. I don't know why, but can we make it fit?
Which I love. I mean,
because Numbers is 22.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with the song 22 unless you have found something since, but yeah, it's one of those where it's like you really want it to fit with something, but you don't think it's going to. But this is one of the only times we actually get a number song. So I was like, oh, Numbers, right? 22.
Now I want to know what's in Numbers 22.
Ooh, yeah.
Just out of curiosity. And
do we have a Numbers 22?
I think so. I know what's in Numbers 19.
Oh, yep. There's a 23.
No way.
What's our Numbers 22?
Y'all, this is so good. The story in 22 is about Balak and Balaam and Balaam's donkey.
Oh, Numbers 22. Please delight us with the donkey.
So there's a moment, and Balaam, I think, doesn't want to listen to God. And I'm not going to read the whole thing in depth right at the moment. Yeah. But Balaam doesn't feel like listening to God. And the Lord, this is Balaam 20 or Numbers 22:28. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and it said to Balaam, "What have I done to thee that you've beaten me 3 times?" Balaam says, "Because you tormented me. If I had a sword, I would kill you." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on whom you've often ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" Balaam said, "No." Then the Lord uncovered Balaam's eyes, and Balaam saw the Lord's messenger standing in the road. But this is the moment when God speaks to a man
through a donkey.
Through a donkey.
Yeah, we're happy, free, confused, and lonely at the same time. It's miserable and magical. Oh, yeah. Tonight's the night we forget about the deadlines. It's time. We ditch the whole scene. It feels like one of those nights we won't be sleeping. It feels like one of those nights you look like bad news. I gotta have you. Yeah, 22 is 22 numbers.
That is so funny. Friends, this is a live occurrence of Pastor Paige and Pastor Megan discovering biblical connections with Taylor Swift.
Yay!
There is nothing better.
There is not. That is fantastic.
So good. So we also listen to these songs
to find God in this era.
Right. So what is the music? What are the lyrics that describe who God is between when the Israelites leave Egypt to when they are in the promised land and being ruled by judges? What did you have?
Treacherous.
Oh yep.
I can't decide if it's a choice, getting swept away. I hear the sound of my own voice asking you to stay. And all we are is skin and bone, trained to get along, forever going with the flow. But your friction, the slope is treacherous. This pain is reckless. This slope is treacherous. I had Begin Again as well as maybe a possibility. Okay. But as I was reading Treacherous again, I was like, yep. Yeah, it's treacherous because yes, there is good. Mm-hmm. There are things that are happening that are positive, but it's still a treacherous journey. As we know, the elders don't get to go on to the promised land, so we have all of those moments of treachery.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in the moments where, they're at war in some cases.
Yeah.
And I think throughout this time, God is really trying to speak to the people. God wants to talk to them, wants them to hear from them, which is why I picked Message in the Bottle.
Yeah.
So where it says, because I could be the one, you could be the one that I love. I could be the one that you dream of. A message in a bottle is all I can do. Standing here hoping it gets to you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's God through so much of this part of the story. Like, I'm just going to stand here and I want you to hear me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Are you going to pay attention?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so often we miss it to the point where God uses a donkey
to have to get his point across.
Right. It's amazing.
It's amazing how God talks to us.
Right. It really, really is. And that's why we do this, because God can speak to us
in all kinds of ways,
including through music.
Yes, which is wonderful.
Yes. So, again, we are so enjoying getting to do this with you guys.
Yes. And this is now normally when we deep dive into our track 5.
Oh, right.
But we're going to do it a little bit differently this time.
Yeah.
So we're going to do our what's next and all the things to come. And then you will understand why we had to change how we do our track 5.
Just for this episode. We'll continue to talk about it. We're not leaving it out if you were waiting.
We just had to do a different version of the track.
Yes.
So, Paige, what's next?
What's next is 1989, Taylor's version.
I can't wait.
I'm so excited. That's such a fun album.
It is. I think it's one of my favorites.
And we're getting into a part of the story that's really awesome. So we'll be moving into the books that follow Samuel, some of the that follow Joshua and Judges, that begin to talk about the people of Israel, the Israelites becoming established.
Yeah.
All of that. So it's a good fit for 1989 as she's trying to establish herself as a pop artist.
Yeah.
More than anything. So we'll be there. Now, what's our weekly question?
It's what Red story did we miss? What would be your track 5? And this might make more sense once we go into it a little bit more. And then what's your Red verse for your personal relationship with God?
Yeah.
Is there a story we missed? Is there something we missed that you thought we were going to talk about during this era. As always, please leave that in a comment, or if you want to direct message us, you are more than welcome to.
And if you send us your read verse, we would love to send you one of our new eras of stickers.
Yes.
So if you want to send that to us through DM or Messenger or whatever, or through our website, we'd love to hear what your verses that describe your relationship with God are from Red.
And as always, you can always find us wherever you can find your other favorite podcasts on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
Yeah. And so as we come to our closing, we've been sharing with you songs that Taylor's written.
Yes.
Alongside psalms from the Bible.
Yes. So our Swift Psalm.
Our Swift Psalm this week is All Too Well, the 10-minute version.
Taylor's version.
Yes.
From the vault.
From the vault. And our psalm is Psalm 119.
Which, what is that, Pastor Paige?
It is the longest psalm in all of Scripture. And when we started to make these connections, I made the joke. I said, a 10-minute version is Psalm 119. As I started to listen to it, I went, oh, it works.
Yeah. And then as we sat and we actually listened to it this afternoon, pulling it together, I will be reading all of the All Too Well verses, and Pastor Paige will be reading all of the scripture. And as always, you can find this in our show notes. And we have tried to make it very clear what is All Too Well and what is Psalm 119.
So why don't we dive in?
Yes. And I can picture it after all these days, and I know it's long gone, and that magic's not here no more, and I might be okay, but I'm not fine at all.
How I wish my ways were strong when it comes to keeping your statutes. Then I wouldn't be ashamed when I examine all your commandments. I will give thanks to you with a heart that does right, and I will learn your righteous rules. I will keep your statutes. Please don't leave me all alone.
And I was thinking on the drive down, anytime now, he's going to say it's love. You never called it what it was. Till we're dead and gone and buried. Check the pulse and come back swearing it's the same. After 3 months in the grave. And then you wondered where it went to as I reached for you. But all I felt was shame, and you held my lifeless frame.
My life is stuck in the dirt. Now make me live again according to your promise. I confessed my ways and you answered me. Now teach me your statutes. Help me understand what your precepts are about so I can contemplate your wondrous works. My spirit sags with grief. Now raise me up according to your promise.
Because there we are again in the middle of the night. We're dancing round the kitchen in the refrigerator light. Down the stairs, I was there. I remember it all too well. And there we are again when nobody had to know. You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath. Sacred prayer, and we'd swear to remember it all too well. Yeah.
When I remember your ancient rules, I'm comforted, Lord. But I'm seized with anger because of the wicked, because of those who have abandoned your instructions. Your statutes have become my songs of praise whenever I lived as an immigrant. Lord, I remember your name at nighttime, and I keep your instruction. This has been my practice because I guard your precepts.
And you call me up again just to break me like a promise, so casually cruel in the name of being honest. I'm a crumpled up piece of paper lying here, 'cause I remember it all. They say all's well that ends well, but I'm in a new hell. Every time you double-cross my mind, you said if we had been closer in age, maybe it would have been fine. And that made me want to die. The idea you had of me, who was she?
My whole being yearns for your saving help. I wait for your promise. My eyes are worn out looking for your word. When will you comfort me, I ask, because I've become like a bottle dried up by smoke, though I haven't forgotten your statutes. How much more time does your servant have? When will you bring my oppressors to justice? The arrogant have dug pits for me, those people who act against your instruction. All your commandments are true, but people harass me for no reason. Help me. They've almost wiped me off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, I haven't abandoned your precepts. Make me live again, according to your faithful love, so that I can keep the law you've given.
Time won't fly. It's like I'm paralyzed by it. I like to be my old self again, but I'm still trying to find it.
Your word is a lamp before my feet, a light for my journey. I have sworn and fully mean it. I will keep your righteous rules. I have been suffering so much. Lord, make me live again according to your promise.
Just between us, did the love affair maim you too? 'Cause in the city's barren cold, I still remember the first fall of snow and how it glistened as it fell. I remember it all too well.
My eyes encounter each hour of the night as I think about your word. Listen to my voice according to your faithful love. Lord, make me live again according to your justice. The people who love to plot wicked schemes are nearby, but they are so far from your instruction. But you, Lord, are nearby too, and all your commandments are true. Long ago, I learned from your laws that you had established them forever.
Wind in my hair, I was there. I was there. Down the stairs, I was there. I was there. Sacred prayer, I was there. I was there. It was rare. You remember it all too well.
Lord, I long for your saving help. Your instruction is my joy. Let me live again so I can praise you. Let your rules help me. I've wandered off like a sheep lost. Find your servant, because I haven't forgotten your commandment.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us again for another Eras of with God and Red Taylor's version. Go and have a great week. Go in peace. Remember that God remembers it all and will take care of you through all time.
Of course, have a great week. Bye. Friends.